In this video, I'm going to do a demonstration of a special order. We're considering right now we're producing 45,000 units and that's below capacity. We've been approached for a special order of 3,000 thermostats, which would bring us up to 48,000, which we have the capacity to do. Now, they don't want to pay our normal selling price of $90. They only want to pay $60. And again, if we were at capacity, we'd say no. Why would we accept $30 less than our normal selling price of $90? But we're below capacity. So what we want to compare is the additional revenue that we're going to earn versus the cost. And as long as that revenue is greater than the cost, we would accept this on the short term. All our costs are stated on a per unit basis currently. And some of these are going to be relevant, some aren't going to be relevant to accepting those additional 3,000 units. And our comparison is going to be our status quo, our profit at 45,000 units versus if we accept the special order of 3,000 units and bring it up to 40,000, and what our costs and revenues are going to be and profit going to be under that scenario. Well, I will note they've asked us, this gets confusing at times, to put all our costs in thousands. We're going to take off those last three zeros as we go through the calculations. So let's first calculate our sales revenue at status quo. $90 per selling price is our current selling price. You notice to take off the 1,000, I multiplied it times 45 instead of 45,000. So it's going to be 4,050. Ultimately, that's 4,050,000. Alternative would be not only the 4,050 that we're going to earn at status quo, but $60 per unit times the 3 or 3,000, because we're taking off the zeros, is 4,230. So the additional revenue is going to be $180,000 or $180,000 higher, which is a good thing, but it's going to come with additional costs. So let's first look at our materials. Currently, our material cost, and that's going to be a variable cost, is $27 per unit times 45 would be 1,215. Again, taking off the last three zeros. Alternative would be, we're still going to have that 1,215, but we're also going to produce 3 or 3,000 additional units. Now, you may say, well, wait a second, you've added $4 in direct material cost to the 27 existing. Note that not only this customer wants to pay us less, $60 versus $90, but they also want some modifications. It's going to add $4 per unit. So ultimately that'd be $31 times 3 added to our original material cost of 1,215. That bumps us up at the alternative to material cost of 1,308. So that's going to be $93,000 or $93,000 higher. Ultimately, I'm going to look at all of the rest of the costs. Labor, let's walk through these. $18 per unit times 45. Current status is 810 or 810,000. To produce those 3 or 3,000 additional units, we're not only going to take the $8 per unit, again, a modification of $2 per unit, so that's going to be $20 per unit times 3. Added to the 810 is going to bump us up to a direct labor cost of 870, meaning our labor cost is $60 high. Variable overhead is normally $7.50 per unit times 45, $337.50. Plus, again, we are making a modification, so not only the 7.5 for those 3 or 3,000 additional units, but a modification of 50 cents, bringing our total variable cost up to $8 per unit times 3. Added to the 337.5 is a total variable cost of 361.5. Minus the original variable cost of 337.5 is $24 higher. So we can go through here and take a look and say our variable cost, materials is going to be $93 higher, labor is $60 higher, variable overhead is $24 higher. That would be a total of $177 additional dollars in variable cost. Subtract that from the $180 additional dollars in revenue, and that's $3, or ultimately if we added the 30, or $3,000 extra in contribution margin. What we have to compare this to is, are any of our fixed costs going to change? Now, you know by now, our rule of thumb for fixed costs is as long as they're in the relevant range, we don't expect things to change. And we normally wouldn't have, but this customer is wanting some modifications, and to get those modifications, we're going to have to rent $9,000 extra in fixed costs and equipment. So our original fixed cost is going to be, they list here $405,000 per year. Again, drop those last zeros. add that 9 or 9,000 onto it, and it'd be 414 or 414,000. Again, $9 extra. So $9 extra in fixed costs compared to only $3 extra in contribution margins means our operating profit would actually be $6 or $6,000 lower. So if we're asked the question, do we want to do this? As long as we want to be profit oriented and not lose money for the company, we wouldn't want to lose $6,000. So versus just rejecting this on this, we have to say, are there changes that we can make? Can we go back and negotiate with this particular customer? So let's take a look at that. At the price that they're willing to pay of $60 for thermostat, maybe we can say, hey, there's a minimum quantity. Can we boost up that quantity? So let's explore that. Looking at the minimum quantity would just be a special application of break even, and we're only focused on the additional cost and revenues related to those 3,000 units. Well, the only additional fixed cost, that we incur is the $9,000. Here, I'm not worried about cutting off the zeros. Yes, I know some of these problems get confusing. Sometimes add the thousand, sometimes don't. So additional $9,000 minus the contribution margin per unit, that's going to be the selling price of $60 minus our total direct material cost of $31, which is the original $27 plus the $4 in modifications, minus $20 in direct labor costs, original $18 plus $2 in modifications, minus the variable cost originally of $7.50 plus the modification of 50 cents, means we're only earning $1 per unit in contribution margin. Divide that into the $9,000 in fixed costs, means they wanted to buy it 3,000, but if they're really only going to pay $60 per unit, we'd have to boost that up to 9,000. I'm not sure that that would work so well to negotiate 3 times as much. This isn't part of the core problem, but if you're doing this in the real world or working some of our quiz or exam problems, we might also consider maybe we need to negotiate the price instead of the quantity. So what's the minimum price? What we would look at is what's all the additional cost. So again, our direct materials of $27 plus $4 in modification, direct labor of $18 plus $2 in modifications, and variable overhead of $7.50 plus 50 cents in modifications. Take that total variable cost times 3,000 units, that'd be total variable cost, plus the $9,000 is only extra fixed cost. It's going to be 177,000 plus 9,000 or 186,000. Divide that by the 3,000 thermostats, and we would only need to negotiate this up to $62 per unit in order to make this feasible. And that might be a negotiation. You may say, hey, I could have done this in easier ways. Certainly you could have done that. You could have said, well, I know the original price is 60. I'm going to start there. I know originally we went through the calculations and said we're going to lose $6,000 if we do that. Just divide it by the 3,000 units, and we only need to add $2 extra on to this. And again, that's a negotiation you can make with the customer.